Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of basically one half of the 80s, 90s band Shelleyan Orphan, because I recently spoke to Jem Tayle to find out more about life, love and poetry. Those years, those early years that he had in the band and before that, but also his latest musical project that is called Vamberator, which does feature as well, this is the project with Boris Williams, he of The Cure, and the album is titled Age of Loneliness. I will give you a link to the album and various other bits in the notes below, but this is the interview. So after several minutes of interest but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject of the early formative years. Jem, it's over to you.
Yeah, well, for me, you know, I can honestly say that I love music from my earliest age without understanding music. Just, it was on a lot. So my earliest memories are downtown Petula Clark. I remember sitting on my potty. How young? Nice. I don't know. Tokyo Melody, because it must have been the Tokyo Olympics, which was early 60s. But my dad, quite often, I used to spend quite a lot of time with my dad at home, and he'd put records on, and it'd be kind of easy listening, light jazz like Fats Waller, and classical music. So you had all of that. So that was happening in the 60s, but we'd also then have the radio on. So on the radio, you'd have the Beatles and the Stones and the Move or whatever it happened to be. That would also be going on in the background. But at this time, you're not saying to yourself, oh, you know, I'm a pop fan, I'm a this, I'm a that. You're not. The sounds are just going in, the songs, you sing along to the songs if you like them. The Beatles just seemed like a fixture even then. It just seemed like, oh, there's another Beatles song. You know, it was just part and parcel, a bit like Eric and Ernie or something. It was another thing that was just always seemed to have been around. And then come about 1970 and suddenly it's T-Rex, you know, suddenly it's Hot Love and Get It On, and suddenly it's your own thing, you know, you've actually got your own thing. And also I remember buying Gilbert Sullivan single and, you know, and at that point you don't have a particularly discerning taste. If you like something, you like something. I mean, I've got diaries from the early 70s where I've got everything in there from Al Green and to Mott the Hoople to, you know, the records I want to buy. You know, I was just really, I loved kind of everything. I still kind of do really. And I'm not worried by that. I'm really quite pleased because it means wherever I am, I'm usually pleased with this music on in the background. But that's how it started for me. And Mark Bolan was a big thing. And obviously David Bowie was a huge thing as well. You know, I remember seeing Starman on Liftoff with Aisha, which
yes.
Thing, and you know, my brothers and I go, oh my god, you know, look at it, have you seen that? Being really excited by it, and yeah, so all of those sort of things they were huge. They, you know, and even though I guess it was in black and white, it seemed like it was in colour.
Yeah, so it's interesting. And also, actually, the radio was quite big, wasn't it? Because I remember listening to, well, my mum would have on Radio 2 in the afternoons, because I suppose being at home still from not going to school, and she'd have Jimmy Young in the afternoon with that kind of classic, What's the Recipe Today? But I think that's why I sort of grew to love so much of that kind of Burt Bacharach and the Carpenters, because one had these kind of amazing songs. And then we, as a family, had a record player appeared in the house. I think at that stage, you know, working class people never borrowed money. So I think my parents didn't have any kind of, you know, anything kind of that exciting in the 60s, because they'd sold it all to get married and have, you know, have a family and have a house. And then a record player appeared and they had this album called Top of the Poppers Play the Carpenters. And I thought, God, this is just the best songs ever. You know, I was probably about 8 or 9 at the time, but I just thought lyrically they were incredible.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't know what was the matter, but I was a very emotional child, and things like Goodbye to Love. I don't know how. Any sad song, I seem to really get the meaning as a kid. And I don't know, they'd make me really sad, and I just couldn't get enough of them. You know, and the Carpenters are absolutely full of that.
Yes, you know? That's all they sing about.
Like we've only just begun. I don't know what, as a child, you don't understand, but somehow it was going on inside me. Or the Shylocks, have you seen her? Anything
Yes.
that was sad, I was there. It was like I seem to understand it.
Yes. It's also, did you enjoy that kind of not melancholy, the drama of songs as well? Because there was the classic, wasn't there, leader of the pack and stuff like that, and people always kind of dying in motorbike accidents.
I remember because it was a re-release, really, I think in the 70s. But oh my God, look out, look out, look out! The drama. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yes, it was quite interesting. Did you have any brothers or sisters that gave you any musical kind of directions?
So I've got an elder brother. Well, I had an elder brother. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. And a younger brother. But my elder brother. So at the same time as say I was listening to T-Rex in 1970, I was also listening to the Velvet Underground. Now, the Velvet Underground to me, it was just another music. It was like pop somehow. It's strange, but that was part of the background as well, because I'd go into his room and he'd have his records on, and so I'd listen to them, and I particularly liked the Velvet Underground, not understanding any of the references whatsoever. I had no idea White Light, White Heat, didn't know what it meant. Sister Ray sounded, I don't know what that was, but it sounded good. It was like, but then they'd have things like Sunday Morning, which are beautiful. It's just like almost could be the Carpenters or something. It's just a song, a well-written song. So I had a brother, but he was also strangely eclectic because he was really into blue beat and ska. So
right.
It was there was such a mishmash of music in my background, that I really didn't say, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and it just was all coming on. There'd be Hawkwind going on, there'd be all manner of things, and then as I started formulating my own tastes, they were eclectic, but they kind of made sense to me. Like I used to like quite a lot of soul music, like as the 70s were, Barry White I really loved, and but lots of easy listening as well, like you say, Burt Bacharach, any of those sort of things that your mum and dad used to have, like Burt Camford, or any of those sort of funny sort of listening. Montavani was another one.
Right, nice one. Actually, my parents were a little bit into that country and western, which I found excruciating, but like Jim Reeves and Boxcar Willie and people like that. So
that didn't happen. I have to say, thank goodness it didn't happen. I can honestly say that's a bit. So I remember Jim Reeves always being advertised, some K-Tel record on TV or something, and I didn't quite understand it. I had a friend who had an album, or his parents had an album. We used to listen to it sometimes. I didn't get it in the same way. Maybe because it had been introduced at home. I don't know. But
so, what was your first concert that you went to?
Well, the first proper concert was Bebop Deluxe. Do you remember them, Bill?
Yes.
Yeah, with Doctors of Madness was the support band with Richard Strange. And that just blew my mind. I mean, I actually had tickets for front row to see Mott the Hoople in 73, but it got cancelled, and I couldn't believe it because at the time, them and T-Rex were my favourite bands. And so I was very disappointed in that.
Devastating. Yes, my God. Bebop. Richard Strange. I mean, it was interesting because I did an interview with him and he said that he was like 2-3 years too early for punk, but everybody in the audience sort of was there, like the young members of the Clash, Sex Pistols, etc.
Yeah, that was the first thing I remember. Oh my God. And I remember, I think it was White Light, White Heat they did, or Waiting for the Man. It was one of those two in their set. So I didn't know who they were at all at the time, but I thought, oh my goodness. So I think that was about 74.
Yes.
1974, I think it was. So it was quite, it grabbed me. I definitely thought, oh, what's this? It was quite interesting. And Bebop Deluxe was, I just remember floating home, walking along the Bournemouth Promenade, going home with it, just ringing in my, that had settled everything. That's definitely what I wanted to do.
Yes. So what year did you at 16, did you just finish with your O-levels or GCSEs, or did you go on to A-levels and university?
No, I left school at 16. Basically, my school reports used to say slow but gets there in the end, and that was the thing. And I used to hate that. It really bugged me. But I was slow, but not daft, just slow. And it took me a while. It didn't take me too long, but when I left school, I started finding out the things that I liked for myself, particularly literature and things like that I wanted to read or I got interested in. And they were slow. So I was just a slow burner, really. And I was offered to go to art school at 16 when I was leaving after my O-levels. But I just thought, oh, no, I've got to get out of education. I hated school. I used to skive a lot. And the headmaster had said to me, if you're going to skive, just keep out of trouble. It was those sort of days, those strange days where people would say and do things. I mean, I was terrible at maths, and they'd put me in the second top maths group for the last 2 years at school. And I used to put my hand up to answer a question, and the maths teacher one day just said to me, if you're going to say stupid things like that, just don't bother saying anything at all. So I sat there for a week or two thinking, bloody hell, because you'd have maths nearly every day. And in the end, I said to him, if I ask my art teacher if I can do art instead of math, he said, all right. And he said, yeah, ask him. And my art teacher was my tutor. And actually, we used to lend each other records, which is quite a strange thing for a school kid. But I mean, I remember he lent me John Cale's Paris 1919, which is still one of my favourite albums. Anyway, so I did art instead of maths. And I remember the first day I went there to do that, they just said, oh, take a board, take some paper and a pencil and rubber and go out into the park and sketch. And I remember thinking, what? I'm being let out of school as well? And there was a cafe in the park, and I just used to go there, get a cup of tea. I'd have 10 number 6 in my pocket. I just used to sit there sketching and have a fag and have a cup of tea. And then, I'd see what time it was, time to go back to school for break time or whatever, and that'd be it. Which sounds brilliant, and it is on one level, but on another level, it's like, bloody hell, where's the care? Where's this?
Yes, they obviously didn't you have you down as some sort of high performer there?
My elder brother was always in trouble at school, like really, quite sometimes the police, few things, and I was completely the opposite. So I was more of a hippie type kid, or just a quiet kid with long hair, and didn't get into trouble. Just, I had to muck about a bit, I suppose, but nothing that they were going to be bothered about.
Yes. Where was your sort of home, by the way? Where was all this taking place?
In Poole, just near Bournemouth.
Right. So you were on the south coast.
Yeah, and my mum and dad ran a home for mentally handicapped people. So we lived in that home, and there'd be like probably 15 patients at a time, and my mum would have to bring them up pretty much on her own. My dad didn't do much of the physical stuff at all, and they had no staff. And so she had that, plus trying to bring up 3 kids. So on some level, we were slightly left to our own devices, I suppose.
Yes.
And and I think that probably has a fair amount to do with how I turned out, to be honest.
That's quite an extreme sort of case, isn't it, really? Because I remember, there was things we saw during the 70s, weren't there? There was all those, like, the little blue cars, the 3-wheelers, weren't they? Because people had got thalidomide.
Yeah.
Do you remember that kind of sight in sort of towns and villages? And that was all like, when you're young and you don't understand things, you just wonder what's going on. But I was just thinking that, relating that to your people with in those conditions that you were living in.
Well, when we were, little, me and particularly my younger brother, we'd get up in the morning, we'd just go straight in with the patients and hang out with them in their sort of sitting room, do puzzles, do knitting. They had a record player, so we'd get, records on, and it was quite looking back, it's quite a strange thing, but not bad at all, just very, very different.
Yes, very different. My God. So then you hit 16, left school. What happened? What period was this? Had punk hit by then?
Absolutely spot on punk exploding, which was absolutely fantastic, because I left school and I went and got a job at Bournemouth Pavilion, just clearing plates, working in the cafes. I was in a kiosk in the gardens for a while, which was good, selling ice creams and things. But it gave me money, which is just fantastic, because all the punk bands and things started to come into Bournemouth. I remember seeing the Clash and the Jam and the Boys, and Richard Hell and different things like that, and it was just fantastic.
I think didn't Blondie, wasn't her first gig in Bournemouth? I seem to remember.
I didn't see that. I did. There were a few I didn't get to see. I did see Blondie actually in Bournemouth, but it was probably a couple of years later. But at that point, I didn't. But I remember seeing John Cale, which was fantastic, and it was a slightly aggressive period at that point, but it was still. That was the first, person I saw from the Velvet Underground. I did see Lou Reed in the 70s a little bit later.
Yes. But it does remind me, that little image you just painted there of that film with David Essex and Ringo Starr, That Will Be the Day. Then he did Stardust. Did you ever see those where he chucks his books into the river and leaves school and works on a fairground and then wants to be a singer and becomes a singer in this band and becomes successful?
It wasn't quite like that. I'd like to think it was, but it was more like...
He started with deck chairs, that's all. That's what made me think, because he was kind of doing deck chairs and his poor mum came to see him.
Yeah, well, it was just waking up one day and thinking, oh my God, I haven't got to go to school. I haven't even got to pretend I'm going to school and skiving. So there was this sudden abyss. Oh, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, it was the summer, so I thought, well, I'll try and get a job. So that was easy, and that was great. And I just used to sleep down the beach. I'd go to gigs and sleep down the beach, and it was kind of a really good summer because punk had happened, and it carried. I remember right the way through to the winter, and still bands were coming. And I mean, before that, I was going to gigs anyway, and me and a friend used to, sneak into gigs all the time. We used to climb up a drain pipe at Bournemouth Winter Garden and get in through the roof. And we used to go and see anyone we could. It didn't really matter who it was. Sometimes we'd see things I absolutely hated, but it was like a night out. So it was
yes, well, that's always quite nice, actually. And then sort of at that stage, had you still thought, music was a potential avenue in your life? Had you discovered your voice at this stage? Had you started playing music or singing or anything, or writing lyrics or poetry?
Yeah, I tried, and I remember I had a Woolworth guitar, and I used to get home at night, and I was still living at home at that point, and my mum was not a good baker or a cook or anything, but she used to make the sponge cake nearly every day out of those packet mixes. Can you remember those 70s sort of packet mixes?
Well, yes.
You just whisk it up, but she used to do a different colour every day. So it'll either be a pink cake, a blue cake, or a yellow cake. They all tasted the same, but nobody let me. They'd usually be like one slice. So I'd take the whole thing up to my room. I'd have gone through the ashtray to see if she'd left any cigarette stubs, and I'd make roll-ups. And I'd sit there listening to John Peel with a cake and a cup of tea and smoking in my room. That would be my evenings, which was quite horrible when I look back at it. But I'd be trying to fiddle around on guitar at that point, and it'd be quite terrible. And it took me, a couple of years before I could really try to write a song. But I did, and then I did some demos in a little studio in Bournemouth, which was quite cheap and basic. And they were rubbish, but it was the first thing I did. So it was like, okay, that's okay. That's, rather than just saying it, you're doing it now, at least you're trying. And that's kind of what I did, really. And then when I met Caroline, I was still trying to do music or saying I was. And I remember saying it to her one day, and I heard myself saying it. I thought, God, I've been saying this to her for months now without me doing anything. So I just decided, I don't really know how I decided. But anyway, I found the Bournemouth Youth Orchestra and just asked for some players. And I said, do you have a bassoon? Do you have a flute? Do you have a cello? Do you have a violin? And the woman was really nice. She said, I'll try and find some people. And she did. And so I met up with them, and we used to rehearse every Saturday. And in the week, I'd try and write a song and try and arrange it. And this is ridiculous because I was pretty basic on guitar, let alone trying to do arrangement. I couldn't read or write music. So, I'd sit there and I'd say, okay, I want the violin to do this. And they'd write it down. I want the bassoon to do this. And we'd put it together and rehearse it. And then that'd be another song done. And we'd rehearse that the next week and you have another song to work on. And I just did that working towards a gig, which I booked in a sort of town hall in Bournemouth, St. Stephen's Town Hall. And so I put a gig on, and I just told everyone I knew and people I didn't know, and it was full when I did the gig, and it was all right. It wasn't amazing, but I did it, and I got applause and people kind of, I thought, blimey, I can't believe I've done that. But after that, it was like, okay, now what do I do? So I didn't think I could repeat that again, to be quite honest. It didn't feel like something you could repeat. And that's really when I thought, right, I have to go to London. It's just not going to work here. I could just tell.
Yes. So you'd met Caroline in Bournemouth and sort of put this project together. How did you actually meet?
Well, there was a couple of friends, and we used to be mucking around all the time at night in Bournemouth with nothing to do and have no money. And then, it'd get quite late. And just this one period, we'd be walking around and we'd see these girls that were walking the same way as us, and we used to be mucking about with them. Then we started seeing them in pubs, and then one day we were mucking around about 1 or 2 in the morning. They just got into their house. We were still sort of hanging around in the street, and suddenly the police arrived and sort of grabbed us. Said, "What are you doing?" or something. And we said, "Oh, we've just been to our friend's house." And they said, "Who's that?" And so they took us to the house. And at this point, we haven't even introduced ourselves to Caroline and her friends. And the police just said, "Do you know these 3?" And they just went, "Yes, we know them." And that was it. So then we went into their flat and we hung out. And that's how we first met.
My God, that's just so 70s, isn't it?
Yeah. But days were like, it was drab. There weren't things to do like there are now.
No, there was a lack of things to do. There was the 3-day week. There was a lack of money. I mean, most people that I spoke to who had bands in the 70s just said you wouldn't believe how little money we had. You couldn't piss in a pot, really. There
as well, I remember. You'd sort of walk right the way from sort of Poole to Bournemouth or something, and you wouldn't think anything of it because that bus fare you might have had, we can get something to eat with that, or So yeah, it was very, and I wasn't into alcohol, so I didn't have a problem. I need to get drink in a pub, so that was lucky, to be quite honest.
Yes, and so from that moment, no alarm bells rang in Caroline's head. Did you then think, right, let's get a band? You did this gig at that stage. Had you got the name of the band as well?
No, so that didn't come till London. So anyways, we both moved. Well, what happened was. So I'd be trying to write songs, and Caroline, she had no interest in music. She liked music, but she not in singing or anything. And I've told the story many times, but it is true. But I used to love the Shy Lights particularly, and I had a tape that I used to take around everywhere with me I had a couple of T-Rex tapes which were always in my bag, and a Shy Lights.
Did the Shy Lights do the song "Have You Seen Her"?
Yeah, Have You Seen?
Yes, I got it right. Sorry.
I loved them. I really loved them, and it was all falsetto and stuff. And my voice at that point could do the falsetto quite well, so I'd be singing it while we're walking along the beach with my tape recorder. And Caroline started joining in with the harmonies and stuff, and it just thought, blimey, that sounds really good. And I'd been writing, and so I don't think we even spoke about it. It just seemed to happen where I just started writing, and we talked about harmonies, or we just started doing them, to be honest. And then by the time we got to London, I got players together, and the first round didn't really work too well. It was really hard work with the musicians, trying to get them to do what I wanted to do. But then one day I'd put adverts around all the colleges in London, and I phoned someone up. It was a violinist, and while I was in the phone box, there was somebody's sort of phone book in there, like a diary type thing, and I was sort of reading it while I was on the phone to this guy who was telling him what I'm doing. And I remember it had "Soft Cells, Say Goodbye, Wave Hello," whatever that song is. The lyrics were written at somebody. Yes. So I'm looking at it and speaking to him, and I'm saying to him, "Oh, so where do you live then?" And he said, "I live in Maidavale." And I said, "Well, I live in Maidavale. Where do you live?" Anyway, he lived across the road, literally across the road from me. And I said, "Blimey, that's amazing." And he said, "Oh, can I take your details?" And he said, "I haven't got my book at the moment. I've left it somewhere." And I just said, "It's not one with a blah, blah, blah," because it was the nearest telephone box to his house and my house. And it turned out to be his diary and his notebook.
Oh God, this is like one of those Richard Curtis films. The imagery of you and Caroline on the beach singing,
Well,
classic soul from the 70s harmonising. I can picture it now. And then the phone box. I mean, this is pure Hollywood.
there was a lot of, I think lots of people have little bits of magic around, and there was that. And so this guy, Richard, it was perfect, so because he lived across the road. So I could say, can you come over? And I'd say, right, so can you do these cello parts? And I'd play the thing, and he'd do the notation, and then I'd say, this is a viola, and we did it. And the Cavalry of Cloud was the first one, and basically I managed to get a trio together, and I had a rehearsal in my bedsit at the time, and couldn't believe what I heard. To be quite honest, it sounded so great. I just thought, oh my God, I've arrived. I've finally written, what I'm trying to express, and I'd asked him if he could find me an oboe player for the next week, and he did, and I wrote an oboe part for it, and I was just beyond, and then by the time me and Caroline put our voices on it, I was so happy, because I thought, it doesn't sound like anyone else. We're not trying to sound like anyone. It's just, at that point, you're not thinking, will other people like it? You're just so happy that you've created something that, that feels genuine, not forced or meant to be almost.
Yes.
And so from that, obviously Caroline got more and more involved, which was great, and suddenly there was an identity was sort of formed from it. And we were very naive and very innocent. And so the Shelley thing, if that's where we were going, the Shelley thing came about because we lived in this bedsit in Maidavale, and one day we saw a TV in a skip. So we carried it up 4 or 5 flights of stairs, put it on, and it just had all the lines. It was broken, but you could just get a picture on it. And it was midnight, and I remember there used to be a programme on Channel 4 called Poetry Gold, and they had a Shelley poem on it, and the guy was reciting it, and it just blew my mind. And I thought, I was so taken with it. So the next day I went to Paddington Library and got out a book of Shelley's poems and a biography.
Yes.
And that was that. I couldn't believe his life story and his politics and the poetry was beautiful, but it was also very political and radical, and it just fitted perfectly with how I felt at the time. And so that's where the name came from, Shelleyan Orphan. The orphan bit was tagged on, but you always need a name for a band, and just at that moment in time, I was heavily into Shelley and reading him, and I still do very much today. He's had quite an effect on my life in different ways.
Well, God, yeah, that's 40 years ago, that whole experience. So I'm not surprised. Your adult life. I mean, at that stage, the 80s, I'd mentioned sort of you had the sort of the mainstream culture with, told by Dylan Jones, didn't you? With, the Blitz Kids and Duran Duran, Live Aid. But then you had all the indie scene. And at that stage, that mid-80s was it was indie gold, really, wasn't it? It was the Smiths had come along. Then you had all those bands like the June Brides, the Wolfhounds, Yeah, No. I mean, there was a huge amount of bands all over the country, with their jingly jangly sounds. I mean, they always say, oh, I didn't want to be part of that scene, but obviously they sounded a bit like it. I mean, so you didn't actually sound like it at all, but you were definitely part of that kind of independent world, weren't you?
Yeah, I don't think we ever saw ourselves as being, a mainstream band or being on a major label even. I remember Warner Brothers had offered us, once we started going round, 2 singles. And I remember thinking, I don't know how, I seem to be quite wise with these things, but I thought, I see quite a lot of bands that get signed to Warner's or people like that, and they get 1 single, and if it flops, that's the end of it. You don't hear of them again. So I thought, I think we'll just hold out, because it'd be much better if we get an album. It'd be more of an achievement for us.
Yes.
Album. And so we just waited and waited, and lucky for us, we did this gig with the Jesus and Mary Chain, and Jeff Travis was there and saw us, and that was perfect because he offered us 3 albums.
Right. Where did you support Jesus and the Mary Chain?
It was an ICA Rock Week, and so the Mary Chain weren't actually. I don't think the first single was even out at that point. Trip Me Up was it that first single, and but they were having violence at their gigs, and I'd been reading about that in Enemy and
yes.
Stuff, but when we first got offered the gig, I just heard there was a group we'd playing with Jesus and Mary Chain, and these tender virtues. And I didn't think anything of it, but as the gig got closer, there's more and more of these reports about the violence. I thought, oh, great, there's us with opos and stuff. It's like, what is this group? And anyway, we played at that gig, and the audience were great towards us. We got an encore. Thought, blimey, that's fantastic, and packed all our gear up. And by the time Mary Jane came on, that was it. And there was glasses flying, and it was quite a thing. And I just remember sort of creeping out of there carefully with our instruments and stuff. It was, and Jeff Travers was there, and I remember me and Caroline had gone back to Bournemouth to see our folks for Christmas. It was just before Christmas, and when we got back on our bedsit thing by the telephone was phoned Jeff Travers, loads of messages, and we phoned him, and he said, "I'll give you anything you want. You have to sign with us."
Right, God, that was.
He offered us 3 albums, and I was like, right, fantastic.
You've got it. And was that? And then the next appearance you had on television, was this the Tube that you were appeared on as well the following year, 87?
Yeah, so when we played live prior to that, we used to have a painter on stage and who used to paint while we were playing, and sometimes we'd have his brother just dressed up in different things up on a step ladder really high up in some kind of garb. And the reason for that was we thought we looked quite sedate on stage, and we needed something a bit more interesting. But anyway, for the Tube, you had to send in a reel of what you looked like live, and then they could assess what they could do with you or whether they'd have you. And at that point, we were having this friend who had a long beard and long hair. We'd have him on a cross, actually, like a crucifix, and he'd have a loincloth on, and he'd be up there. And we sent that reel into the Tube, and they just said, we can't use that. They said, well, because it goes out on a Sunday, and there'll be, it'll just be, we'll be in trouble for that. So we couldn't do that. So we just had 2 painters. But I just remember thinking, well, Frankie Goes to Hollywood had all this sort of masochistic sort of leathers and whips, and because it was Jesus in a loincloth, it was too much on a Sunday.
Yes, well, I remember it was recorded or broadcast on a Friday afternoon, but I didn't realise it was repeated again. So, yes, interesting times. Did you get good at that stage? Had you picked up a little cult audience of followers who started to?
All, but I don't know if you would remember, but we were either loved or hated, and I look back, it doesn't matter now because it's all gone, but our first reviews sort of called us middle-class music students, and I wish I'd sort of just spoke up more, to be honest, back then, and said, look, I left school at 16, because there's such an endeavour goes into what you do. I still don't read and write music now, but I arrange all my own stuff, and it was, having not really achieved anything at school, for me, it was a huge achievement. I really felt like what I was doing was valuable and worth it. And Caroline too. I mean, Caroline was a lot brighter than I was. I mean, I think she had 9 A levels or something. She was a bright spark, and she was also, someone that could sort of turn her hand to almost anything.
Yes.
Anything I did, if we did anything together, she'd sail through it, and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't retain this. I can't retain.
Yes.
How do you remember that? How do you, I'd have to work really hard at whatever I did, which I don't mind, but she was very, she was very good at picking things up. And I think that was the same with her singing. She just kind of understood it once she started singing. She didn't really struggle with it at all.
No, yeah, yes, no. I'm sort of blessed with being very mediocre and having to practice, if I do anything, a lot more than anybody else to get just a pass or C. So it's all right. You get there in the end. You enjoy the process. You enjoy the journey.
You do get there in the end, and it works for me, to be honest, like that, especially doing this Vamberator thing. It's made me think, I can. I do have it. I do have the qualities to create this stuff. It's just you don't go about it the same way as other people do, but the end result is okay.
Yes, well, absolutely. Just briefly then, on the band, on your first band in the 80s, I mean, how does it then, your first album has a massive production and budget then? I'm guessing you had a big budget.
No, not particularly. It sounds like it had a big budget. It was done at Abbey Road, all these strings, everything. It wouldn't have been cheap, but it's by standards even of the day, it wasn't massively expensive. It's just we got given a deal at Abbey Road because they were trialing one of the very first Mitsubishi digital machines.
Right.
And so we were kind of like an experiment with that. And that's kind of how we got a cheap deal there. I mean, it was nothing to do with us. It was to do with Jeff Travis. He'd found, I was like, oh, wow, great, Abbey Road, amazing. I figured we'd just be going into similar studios we used to do our demos in. That's what I figured. I thought it was an indie label. We're not going to be in a big studio. So that was quite something to get that.
Yes, but you had Danny Thompson bass, you had Paddy Bush.
Well, Thompson I wanted because of Nick Drake, because I was a massive Nick Drake fan, even way back in the 70s. So that wasn't, that was somebody I'd discovered. And so that was fantastic having him. Yeah, that was amazing. Then Hayden Bendel was Kate Bush's engineer, and we'd asked if Kate could do something on the album, and we sent a couple of tracks, and she said she really loved them, and but she thought, but I don't know what you think I could do on them, because obviously Caroline was singing, and but she said, but Paddy really wants to do some stuff on it. So we said, okay. So he came down and smoked weed all day and played some tambura and didgeridoo and some strange instruments here and there, just small parts. So that was it really. And then the strings were conducted by Andrew Powell, who was also in Kate Bush's band and also at one point in Cockney Rebel. We only got drums on 2 of the songs on that album, but that was Stuart Elliott from Cockney Rebel and Kate Bush. So we ended up having these people that kind of knew each other, and they say, oh yes, well I'll get such and such in then. And Hayden knew them all.
Amazing. And did you enjoy that experience? Because it must have felt a lot suddenly intense.
Yeah, we did, but there was some drama going, nothing to do with us. I had, but there was some drama going on, people involved in the actual recording, which shouldn't have been happening in the studio. So it was enjoyable on one level, because obviously you're making your first album, and then there was some people that were having personal difficulties in their lives, and it spilt over into the studio a couple of times while me and Caroline sort of go, what the hell's going on here? It's quite big things, to be quite honest. And so yeah, it was great, but then there'd be these dramatic things happening, and also there was 2 or 3 times that the studio manageress had come in and said, do you know if Rough Trade are actually going to pay any money? We were like, what? We don't know anything about it, because it hadn't paid any money at that point. So we were under the impression that maybe if, it could be, the plug could be pulled at any point.
Yes.
So there was a bit of drama with that, but we were enjoying it all the time, all the same. I mean, Abbey Road, and this is where the Beatles did this, and and it's quite an institution. It's kind of like the BBC.
Yeah. And amazing. And the album sounds amazing. Were you pleased with it when you finally sort of mixed it, mastered it, and got it?
I felt it was too clean, I have to say. The digital thing, it felt too clean. Our demos were rougher, and I always loved the sound of, things like Eleanor Rigby or anything where the strings are really present, and really that's what in my mind I wanted. Whereas a lot of the sort of air around everything was kind of compressed and squeezed out. And I was very pleased with the writing. I think that was it more than anything, that me and Caroline had managed to capture that. But I like the spirit of our demos, and a lot of people say that about their own work anyway, don't they? They like their demos because they capture a freshness. And but yeah, I was proud of it for sure. And then there were little things like having Jeffrey Bailden doing themes. So Jeffrey Bailden was Catweasel, and so we used him on the B-side of Anatomy of Love. So that was a treat.
Yes, absolutely. And when it came out, did you tour at all during that period to sort of promote it?
Not a huge tour, but we did play dates. We did do dates, and like I say, they were mixed reviews. Middle class music students. One of them says somebody that thin shouldn't be allowed on a stage. That was me. That was quite at the time, it'd be really stupid things like that. And I think it was the Bollock brothers or the Stud brothers. I can't remember now, but sort of they started a sentence off with this band is shit, posing as art. It was it opened up with it, and it was a real slagging off. But it was half a page in Melody Maker.
Right. God, that is cruel, isn't it?
Caroline, and I remember thinking, oh my God, and our manager came round, he was bouncing and all smiling. I said, well, you're so happy. And he said, so have you seen the review? I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, look at it. It's, half a page. And I said, yeah, I know, but there's half a page of slagging us off. And he said, yeah, but that's how important they think you're going to be. So now look at all the other reviews in the paper. And of course, the next reviews we get were good. And, you think, oh, that's how it all works.
Yeah, so it's a weird one, isn't it, really? Yes, it's cruel. So then with that release, what was it like to try and then bring a follow-up album? And also, we're getting towards the end of the 80s where Rough Trade had got their financial problems, and then the music scene changed quite radically in the 80s, didn't it?
Yeah, I think without anybody saying it, there was a pressure for us to sort of have a single that would be a hit or not a hit, but at least do well on the indie level. And so there was that. And then Caroline had definitely decided she wanted to be, in a way, the main singer and contribute more to the songwriting. And that was changing a dynamic. And where, in my mind, I thought we'd be doing kind of like Hellebrine 2 in a way, like an extension of that, but better songwriting. But I thought it would grow in that direction, and it didn't. And I wasn't disappointed, but that's where I thought we were going. And then by the time we started writing and putting it together, it had become some electric guitar had crept in, and some drums, and maybe even more of a folky element crept in as well as pop, like Shatter. It was a bit. It's quite similar to how I am now. We just let it happen how it happened. So whatever song style came out was how it came out. We didn't think too much about it.
Yes. And where did you record it, and who was your producer at this stage?
We recorded it at Conk, which was the Kink studio, most of it there. We did some at the Windings in Wales and a bit in Scotland somewhere. It was kind of all over the place. But Dave Allen, who produced The Cure as well, he was the producer on that album. He wasn't around a lot, so it's when you say somebody's a producer, it's quite strange because you sometimes think, well, what have you produced? Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of the time the engineer was recording us, and then the mixes aren't particularly wild. They're quite straightforward, so there's not a lot of production gone into the sound or the end product. But anyway, he was the producer. And I thought that's probably how Robert Smith had got to hear it. But apparently somebody sent me something the other day saying I was responsible for Robert Smith hearing your first album.
Oh.
And he explained why. And so that's how Robert Smith was already aware of Shelleyan Orphan. So when Dave Allen was doing the Century Flower album, obviously he passed it on to him. And that's kind of how that came about, I think.
And what was it like touring with The Cure in the late 80s? I mean, because I think in the late 70s, early 80s, they had a band called And Also the Trees, who were very young at the time, supporting them for a few dates. I don't know if you've come across that little combo. Yes, but then, The Cure by the late 80s had become a major force in crafting these, perfect pop songs and were
Well,
indie giants.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't never a Cure fan, but I didn't realise how big they were. I mean, I obviously they'd had maybe a hit or two by then, and I remember seeing them with Susie and the Banshees in the late 70s on the same bill, with Robert Smith playing in the Banshees. So I'd seen them, and I knew a few things. I think I bought The Head on the Door. I think I might have bought that album. But anyway, it was when we actually went out on tour with them, I couldn't believe that they were playing stadiums and things like that. That was, and how huge they were. And that was quite mind-blowing, to be quite honest. And it was great for us. I mean, it was, it was like a dream, it's like being a music fan and suddenly you're in that situation. But I treated a lot of it like work. I just thought, well, this is what we've got to do. This is kind of, you enjoy it, but at the same time, you've got to get down to it and, make it work for you. It's quite hard work.
Yes, I would imagine, to keep it going. And was it that period when Caroline and Boris become kind of
that happened I guess it happened while the tour was going on, but then they got together at the end of the tour. And yeah, so that was then another dynamic changed, in a good way, very good, having Boris around.
Yes, that was amazing. And then, when that happened, and then sort of we creep into the 90s, do you get sort of an offer to sort of do a collaboration on 4AD, this Mortal Coil compilation?
Caroline did, yeah. Caroline did. She did 3 tracks for the Blood album, and we'd known Ivo through. Well, in fact, I got to know him a bit, and he always used to curse the fact that we hadn't signed with 4AD, and it was quite funny because I used to say to him that we had a very long conversation when we were hawking our demos around. I phoned you up once and got through to you, and he was saying, I just can't believe that I didn't take notice of that, because he used to come and see us all the time, and I think that's why Caroline ended up singing on 3 tracks.
Yes, because at this time of year you've got a track called Ice, haven't you, which is on every indie acoustic Christmas album, isn't it? Where was that recorded?
That was recorded in Crouch End, in the church, I think it's called, or it was. Warner Brothers, I think it was, just asked us to do a Christmassy type track. So we'd used Nigel Eaton on Hurdy Gurdy before. Had we before? Guys, it's trying to get a. Anyway, we'd worked with Nigel Eaton because he's on Hum Roots, and maybe I can't remember if that came before or after. I think it came after Hum Route, just after.
Okay, yes, because he was in Blowzabella, wasn't he? The great folk band.
That's how I got to use it. I went to see Blowzabella one night, and I was blown away. So yes, I went up to him and asked if he'd be interested, and he was fantastic. And in fact, we did a gig in Paris, just me, Caroline, and him, once as well. He was fantastic player. Yes.
Interesting enough, I managed to track down the original hurdy-gurdy player of Blowzabella, who, was there from the mid-70s to the early 80s.
Mm.
But then he got slightly elbowed out by a few of the members. It was a heartbreaking story, the poor chap. I think he recovered, but he was a bit heartbroken. But yeah, I did. I mean, I saw Blowzabella quite a few times and had a great cassette called The Wall of Sound, which just had such a good sound. It was that drone, wasn't it?
I mean, Nigel Eaton, his dad makes, or I don't know if his dad's still around, I don't know, because it's a long time ago now, but his dad made hurdy-gurdies, and apparently he worked on nuclear missiles or something like that, being his job, and one day he saw a film with Dirk Bogarde in it, and in the background in one of the scenes was somebody playing a hurdy-gurdy, and he just decided that's what he was going to do. He's going to make hurdy-gurdies, and he did. that's what he ended up doing, and that's how Nigel Eaton got interested in the hurdy-gurdy, because of his dad making them.
Man, that's so incredible. Because then during that period, there was a band that him, Nigel, and Paul James from Blows a Bella formed called Ancient Heartbeat, and they did a great song with Sheila Chandri, I believe.
Yeah, the
Monsoon.
Monsoon. Yeah, that's right. And he did Whirling Pope Joan. Do you remember that?
No.
That was another thing he did around that time, I think.
And then a bit later, he did this stuff with Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, didn't he?
That sort of came about because of us, I think.
Excellent.
I think that came about. I'm trying to think, what was the connection? I think it was Paul from The Cure, because he was with Plant and Page at that point. I think it was that, and we'd got to know Paul a bit. I think that's how that happened.
Yes,
Paul
God.
Paul had seen Nigel Eaton with us, I think, and then had suggested it to Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. I think that's how it went.
God, I tell you, anybody who listens to this, they're going to be blown by our knowledge of the hurdy-gurdy and Nigel Eaton, aren't they?
I've got a hurdy-gurdy.
You have one?
Yeah, I'm terrible at it, but I've used it. I've used it live, and I've used it on recording a few times, but I'm rubbish. Don't go thinking I'm terrible. If I buy an instrument, I will always get something out of it, even if I can't play it properly, if you know what I mean, where it's passable. And say, oh, there's a hurdy-gurdy on that, and not really knowing that actually if you isolated it, it's full of squeaks and, But yeah, it's a beautiful instrument I've got, and I keep thinking I should sell it, really. Someone else to, make use of, because it's beautifully made, and it's made by quite a well-known French hurdy-gurdy maker. And I just think that probably in somebody else's hands, they could really make it sing.
Yes, well. And so look, yes.
Bumping it because it's lacquered and it's beautifully made. And I think, oh, God, one chip on that and it's over.
Oh, a lot of pressure, isn't there? So then as we trundle into the John Major years, and you've done your 2 albums, and obviously, there was lots of ups and downs and romance with Caroline and Boris. So what's it like then to try and bring out the 3rd album for the band? Because obviously Rough Trade had almost destroyed the entire independent music scene, hadn't they, with their unfortunate bookkeeping?
Well, I think they'd lost interest in us anyway. I mean, this is what happens, you see, and I think the Sundays might have been just after that, but, there'd always be another band coming along so I think our chance with them was probably the Cure tour, and had we crossed over at that point, they'd have been very interested, but we didn't. And so I think there was interest lost there, and it's a shame because, I think Humroot's a really good album. I think it's another interesting album. It doesn't get written about in a way that's, I don't know, it's not seen as, as good as the others, but I think Boris's drumming is absolutely fantastic on it. There's some really good pop moments on it with Burst and Dead Cat. Caroline's voice is just fantastic on it. It's got a bit of everything on it, to be honest.
You got John Martin on fiddle.
It's got a lot of good moments to it, that album, but for whatever reason, you can't say. But I didn't even know it was out until one day I bought Q magazine and saw a review of it. So that's how far down the road Rough Trade were in terms of interest in us, I think. I mean, Jeff probably was, trying to save Rough Trade, or, just totally preoccupied.
Yeah. So did you have a moment then when you decided the band was going to call it a day?
Never did. It just sort of, Caroline always used to be saying, don't worry, I know we're going to make it. That she'd always, and I used to say, but how? She'd say, nobody wants this. And I always I couldn't quite understand why Caroline, I think Seymour Stein had heard of Caroline. This is a story I heard, and wanted to sign her without even hearing her because he'd heard what people had said about her. And she just didn't really, Caroline was quite strange like that. She didn't really take much notice of it. So she could have followed it up. I think he wanted her to go out to America and meet her. And she didn't. She got the outfit Babacar together with Boris.
Yes.
And they'd started writing stuff for that. And then they called me in to ask me to play on it and do stuff on it. And that took a long time, and there was no hurry about it. They were quite chilled about it. I was living in London and they were actually living in Bath. And and then it kind of came out to nothing, really. It was a shame because it was a really good album and some really good songwriting on it. And that seemed to be the end of what we would be doing together, although we used to talk about it all the time, and quite often I'd be at Caroline's house with a guitar and we'd be sitting there tinkling away and say, put the tape recorder on, we'd be collecting bits all the time. And then one day, one little Indian, phoned up to say they'd got our back catalogue, and I'd asked Derek, is there any money? And he said, why? And I said, because Caroline wanted to do another album. And he said, well, we'll do that. And it was just said just like that, which was like, really? And he said, yeah, call me next week, we'll arrange it. And that was that, over in less than a minute. So, okay. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that was, he just said, so I didn't know you were still writing together. And that was that. It was,
and what was it like, sort of, oh God, sorry, I'm just playing one of your songs. I didn't realise, because all your stuff is on Spotify, isn't it?
Mm.
So yes, but that was quite a gap, wasn't it, between nearly 18 years? I mean, a lot has happened in that time. So roughly, what did happen in that time? How did you sort of survive?
Well, I did, both of us kind of got into the healing arts. Caroline, like I said, was always good at everything. So it took me a while, like having to learn anatomy and physiology. It took me ages. It took Caroline 5 minutes. We both went in the same class together. I was like, oh my God, I've got to draw the diagram of the heart and and I had to make myself learn it. But I ended up, when my mum died, I was left a bit of money, not a huge amount, and I was living in London, so I spent a lot of it. Obviously just living in London, but there was a bit left, so I thought I need to do a course in something. So I did a course in Chinese medicine and aromatherapy. So I was interested, and there was a course that was combining the elements of plants and things with Chinese medicine. So that's where the aromatherapy part came in.
Yes.
And I really liked the idea of that. And so I did that. And because I was doing that course, you had to have, clients to practice on and things. So I was living in a house with a couple of dancers, and so I used to massage them and their friends to get my hours up.
Yes. Were they dancers, or were they doing the 5 rhythms? And
no. They were contemporary dancers,
right? And
so I did that, and then because of the Babacar thing, I came to Bath, and I came back to Bath over a year, and almost every week they'd say, oh, come back, do some more, come on. And then they said, why don't you move in next door? Boris and Caroline had a small sort of cottage next door, which was very basic and needed a bit of tender loving care, but anyway, it was fine. I moved in there, and the person opposite was opening a spa at the Royal Crescent Hotel in Bath, and I was massaging her, so she said, do you want a job? So I ended up going to that spa and thinking I'll do that for 2 or 3 months. And that became 8 years. And I became the manager of the spa. You're asking me what I did in this.
Yes.
And from there, and it was a holistic spa. It was quite a spiritual space. And I was really into that stuff at the time. And I ended up specializing in a therapy called Watsu, which is shiatsu in water. And a very beautiful treatment. It's almost like dance in water. Very, very deep treatment that most people say is like going back to the womb. You really go very deep with it. So I did that for 8 years, and then I also worked at a primary school with children for 10 years with kind of special educational needs, which I really loved. I really enjoyed that job. Very special.
Yeah, God, that's incredible. Yeah, because I sort of, during that late 80s and then especially the 90s, the whole alternative healing world was something that I seem to be surrounded by people doing various things, and that's why I mentioned the 5 rhythms. But there was all the other, from gong baths to qigong to homeopathy, herbalism, crystals. Yes, the whole lot. Sweat lodges. People love doing a sweat lodge, and yes, North American Indians.
There's lots of it I hated, and I like that 90s period of new age stuff. Oh, it sort of drove me crazy, I have to say. But I did a lot of sweat lodges, and I quite liked them. But there was a lot of just charlatans and people just, for me, talking nonsense anyway.
Absolutely. There was. I used to go to these events like some of those kind of rainbow circles or the Welsh dance camp, and people would be sort of channeling this, spiritual guru or Indian chief. Oh God, yeah, there was a lot of nutters actually.
I got stories about that which I won't say here, but anyway, yeah, it was. It kind of drove me crazy. It really did. It used to, I hate the word healer as well. I've done a course for a weekend, and now I'm a healer, and I'm a master, and I'm a Reiki master, because I've done, it's like, it takes a long time to work, to work with energy and to understand it in a way not in a new age sense.
Yes. Well, I think part of it was that was what my community was like, and also I was very asthmatic. So I was always hoping that someone would say, yes, I could really help you. But they took the money, but it was always like left me where I was at the beginning. And then I think one day I just had lost my patience with it all and thought, actually, you've never helped anyone.
And it's a shame, because there is a lot of power in this stuff in the right hands, and with it, if the ego is not present, and, there's a lot to be learned from this stuff. But it just became another thing to do, another thing to belong to, and it was too easy. I remember with Watsu, a dear friend of mine now, she was the one that first showed me Watsu, and as soon as I had my session with her, I said, "Oh, can you teach me that?" And she said, No, I can't. You've got to go away and learn it. You've got to find the courses," and that's what I did. So I went to Florida 4 times. I had to go, put a lot of hours in so that I really understood what I was doing, and it was right.
Yes, it's interesting. So making that album 2008, I mean, did it feel at that stage an enjoyable process again? Because you'd sort of completely removed yourself from that kind of trying to make an album, do a tour.
Still in me, so I'd never said no. But I just, I've never been 100% confident in my ability, so I knew that I would have to dig really deep to get out what I knew I had in there. I had faith in Caroline, because, like I say, she was very good at just. She could be incredibly annoying. It's like, okay, I've got to do that now. Okay, I'll do that now. And then, but with Caroline, she'd do half of something and do it half really well, and then get bored. So you'd have to pick up the pieces, and there'd be a lot of that. But it was quite difficult, in all honesty, between me and Caroline. At that point, trying to write, we were really close and everything, but trying to find something mutual, a mutual understanding of what we wanted to do was tricky, but we did it. We got there.
Yes, God, that's incredible. And when the album came out, how did it get received? And did you do any live dates for it at that point?
It got received quite well, but just the same as now in a way. Very hard to get reviewed. There was Paul Lester did a piece for us in The Guardian, which was nice because he was a fan anyway, and he just picked up on it. But I think getting things in Mojo and Uncut and all the others was just about impossible again. Even One Little Indian found it difficult, I think, to get us put into things. I think people had preconceived ideas about us, and that just made it difficult. But the reviewers that did write about it, were really praiseworthy and really gave it a thumbs up, and sort of were really surprised that we could have been missing for so long and yet come back as if we haven't been away in a way. So
yes, but then
I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of that album as well. I think Caroline's voice is just stunning on it. The songwriting, once again, is eclectic and crazy. Got country and western on there. There's all sorts of things. There's pop on there, some good pop things on there, folky things. Typical us, to be honest.
Yes. But then once that came and went, then did you just go back to your kind of day job, so to speak, and wait for them?
Well, we did a few gigs, not many, with a band to do that, and they went very well. They were okay. They were attended okay, not hugely. We played things like the Water Rats in London and the Thekla in Bristol and 2 or 3 other places, and that was it. So that completely dropped off. No management, no promoter. We didn't have any support, to be honest. And we were supposed to do another album with One Little Indian, and the budget was a lot smaller this time, but we thought, we'll try and work with it. But this was at the point really where Caroline wasn't well. So we were dealing with that quite a lot. And she was able to function very well for a long time. And then after a while, it seemed it was going to be more difficult. So a lot of life was focusing on her and her health. And she had a daughter by then as well, Inky, who's my goddaughter. And I was helping to bring Inky up as well. So there was a lot of life was taken up with Caroline and that kind of family life.
Yes. And had she also sort of tried to sort of cure herself with alternative medicine?
That's pretty much all she did, and that became very difficult because you want to support someone, and to be honest, she was right to do it up to a point. What happened, without going into too much detail, she did see someone immediately that was alternative, who did, with supplements, manage to shrink the tumour by half. So that immediately gave her, complete kind of belief that she could heal herself. But it just went on and on with different people. And a lot of charlatans, as far as I'm concerned, and people charging ridiculous amounts of money, and some people saying, I don't think you do have a tumour, and blah, blah, blah. Until it got, into a place which was just beyond,
Yes, God, that is devastating, isn't it?
And, when she's a close friend, and you do have to, support the person with their decisions, which is what we were doing. So, yeah, it's very difficult.
Yes. Did she, towards the end, did she sort of go to, a hospital and a surgeon and a consultant? Had she sort of...
Yeah, there was a point where she had to, she did have chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Somebody very generous in the village paid for it to see a top person in London, and he basically said, the only way we can deal with it is try to shrink the tumour and then to see if we can remove it. And that's basically all we can do. And I felt very sorry for him because he was quite alarmed. And I remember saying to him, I don't know how you do this at the end. He said, because, we do have successes. Unfortunately, there's more, young females. He was basically talking about people that want to go down the alternative route.
Yes.
End up coming to see him because it hasn't worked.
had it been the case then that if she had just gone straight to the hospital surgeon, she would have probably been...
Who knows? But, there was, I think there were probably points where, something could have been done, to be honest. I can't really go into too much.
No, my God, yes, let's. I know that's a bit of a downer, but yeah, we get to an age where sort of these things start to crop up a lot, don't they? So
yeah,
it's we have to all navigate our own path at times, which is tricky. And then so obviously that's horrendous, that experience, and life changes quite drastically, doesn't it? So then musically, is it then the case that this is this project that has just come out? Is this the next thing that you're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, this is me doing to be quite honest, it's me doing what I've always done, but with me singing, I guess.
Yes.
That's the thing, taking the lead role in it. I mean, it's as eclectic in its own way as some of the Shelleyan Orphan stuff, and part of it is finding out what I've got to write. Because I don't know if I'll ever make another album. I hope I do. But I just thought I'm just going to write, see what comes out, try not to stop it, whatever style it is, whatever it is, and take it from there. And I love my pop music.
Yeah. So how did you then did you get an offer from an Italian label who got in touch with you?
The Max at Manticore had contacted me and Caroline to do a Shelleyan Orphan album, and it had been offered over kind of a 2-year period, and it was every now and again he'd be in touch again, and we'd talk about it. But at that point, Caroline was getting worse, and then it got to the point where Max was sort of pushing us, and I was saying that Max, Caroline's not very well. And then it was like, look, she's really not well. And then, I had to, because we were all hoping it was all going to turn out okay. And then I had to say that it's not going to happen. And so when Caroline passed, Max was saying, well, look, I'd really love you to do an album. And I was saying, I'm not sure right now, to be honest. I can't really think about it because I'd only ever written with Caroline.
Yes.
And it wasn't that I thought I couldn't do it. It's just how I would feel about it. And it, me and Caroline, it was very stressful working together. So on one level, it was like, well, I won't have that to do with. Despite the stress, let me just say, despite the stress of us working together, we loved each other, and we were always at the end of it happy that with the product that we sort of came out with, despite all of that. And if she was here, being interviewed, she'd be saying the same thing. So I'm not saying anything, that she wouldn't agree with.
Yes, well, absolutely. No, I can imagine. So, so then, so you had a bit of existential angst on sort of going forth.
Yeah, well, I suppose I thought, I've always thought a lot of people see Shelleyan Orphan as Caroline, and that's how it was, and I think Caroline felt that in a way as well. Whereas for me, it was, two songwriters with this strange vision of how we put our music across musically, instrumentally, some of the things we sing about, with an amazing singer as well. That's how I saw it, with added harmonies, sort of a cherry on top. That's how I kind of saw us. And so I thought, me doing it on my own, I'm not sure how that will be taken. So I had to just sort of bite the bullet. And I just thought, well, the only way I can do this is to generally try and please myself and see what comes out of it. And so I thought, well, let's do some pop stuff and try and be a little bit more upbeat than kind of slow. And it's got a bit of everything in there. But I think there's more pop elements in general in this than I've done before.
Yes, but then how did you get your sort of, who did you, who deciding who to work with? How did that sort of develop?
Well, me and Boris have worked together for, obviously now for years on and off in different ways. And so, I'd asked him if he'd wanted to be part of it, and he'd said yes. He lives in France, and I live here, so I would write stuff and send it to him. and he put a drum idea down, and so that's how we did that part of it. And then Charlie Jones, bass player, played on 4 of the tracks, and he played on We Have Everything We Need. So I knew him anyway, and he's a friend, and so that was easy enough. And then the rest of the stuff I've done myself, or I got string players in Italy. I got some horn players together over here. We recorded them here. And yeah, so the other instrumentation basically has come from Italy. The backing vocal was Jo Nye. She's local. She's a great singer that we know, that's local and has been in a few different bands. Steve Evans, he kind of produced and mixed We Have Everything We Need. So he's mixed this. So there's been a few people that have, utilised before.
Yes. And how did you get the name of the band? How did this come about? I know it's not the most exciting, but it's just so curious.
Yeah, well, so there was a B-side to a T-Rex song called Thunderwing. I don't know if you know it. It's the B-side of Telegram Sam.
Oh, yes.
And basically, and I'm a big T-Rex fan, Mark Burnham fan, so I think I know everything about him, and obviously I don't. And I thought that he sang in this song, My Little Baby's a tippy-toed Vamborator. So in my mind, I'd always thought, without even looking at it, I just thought, Vamborator. All these years, right from 72, whatever, that's kind of name, I just thought it must be a thing. But it stuck with me. And then one day, when I was thinking about a name for that, I thought, Vamborator. I better just go and check those lyrics. He doesn't sing that at all. He says, My Little Baby's a tippy-toed Vamp-rider.
Oh, right.
And I thought, wow, Vamborator. I wonder what that is then. So then I typed it into Google. Nothing came up. So it doesn't exist. So I thought, wow, I'm having that. And so that was it. That was Vamborator. And I thought, that's perfect because I can make Vamborator be whatever I want it to be.
Yes.
The Vamborator is a thing to me, and it's a thing that includes the donkey, which I don't know if you've seen the videos yet. And
yes.
Yeah, so the donkey appears in a lot of things, and it serves its purpose very well for me because I don't have to be seen very much. And it has a sort of strange melancholy playfulness about it, I think, a quirkiness, which is kind of what I want.
Yes. And that was so with the songwriting, did you do it all, or are these all songs that you have written quite recently, or were there anything that you were going back into your archives?
Yeah, there's a couple of oldish ones, like Creature in My House. I wrote that even when Caroline was around, and she didn't like it at all. Well, at first she didn't like it at all, but it was Inky, her daughter, really liked it. And then eventually Caroline did really like it. But I kept hold of that because Inky liked it. I thought, well, that'd be great. And because Inky always used to be saying, wouldn't that be great to put out a Halloween? It's like a Halloween song. So it did come out on Halloween this year. So that was old. Sleep the Giant That Sleeps, I'd started and never really got too far with, but I kind of liked the riff that I'd come up with, the strings and the piano. And then the rest of them were pretty new.
Yes. There was one unusual one, which is I Don't Want to Cut the Grass. Where's the kind of inspiration for this? This is such an unusual song. Well,
okay, so the music part of it, when I was at the school that I was at, when I left, all the kids bought me a mini Moog synth as a leaving present, which is some present to buy someone who's leaving.
Yes.
I was very close with quite a big bunch of kids there that I'd helped out over the years, and their parents, and they bought me that. So I'd never had one of those before. So I just, fiddling around, I kind of wrote that backing track really quickly and I had it for a while, for a year or two. And I wasn't going to use it for anything, but I kept sort of listening to it. I thought, actually, I really like that. And that's so different from anything else I've got on the album. So that was it. Then I thought, well, what am I going to write about? And then I'm particularly into nature, and, we do quite a lot of stuff in my village, planting and stuff. And I really don't like cutting trees or plants or
Yes.
So basically, it's about having a kind of reverence for all of those things, nature, and not disturbing it and letting it be. To be honest, so that's what it's about. And there's references to John Clare in there, poet who I really like, nature poet.
My God, I was a member of the John Clare Society once. I joined. I was quite fascinated with John Clare, and yes, his extraordinary story of life and sad end in a mental institution.
Was he in Bedlam? I think he might have been in Bedlam. Might have gone there.
And there was a theatre company in this area called Eastern Angles, who did a play about John Clare, which was amazing. So yeah.
He was born in, or he lived in Helpston, was it?
Yeah, possibly. I can't remember. This was in the early 90s, actually. So, yeah, that was 35 years ago.
He's one of those people where, I just came across a poem. In fact, when me and Caroline lived in London, we lived in a bedsit, and this girl bought me a poetry book one Christmas as a Christmas present, and it was a John Clare poem that stuck out for me, and then suddenly I wanted to find out all about him.
Yes. God, you must be easy to buy for Christmas presents, really, and just go to the poetry section.
Yeah. And you might get a song out of it as well.
This is all good. But then I was going to say, but you write as one song is about Caroline, isn't it?
Yeah, Zebra Butterfly. Because lots of people say, Caroline came to me in a dream, or I felt Caroline around me, which is lovely. It's fantastic, but I don't seem to have that. And and that on one level could be sad, but then I actually think she's all around anyway. That's how I see it. I mean, I think about her a lot, obviously, and I see her in things. I see her in, the cafe in my local sort of village shop. There's a little robin that comes every day, and one of the last sort of very sweet things for Caroline was when she was very ill. We'd have her in the garden, and there was a little robin that was always around her. Very friendly little fella. As soon as she was outside, and so that always reminds me of Caroline. I think anything that reminds me of her like that, then I think there's some kind of connection, and I think that's good enough for me.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's.
After Caroline died, I was at Boris's house in France, and we were sat by his swimming pool, and we were probably both a bit glum. We were just sitting there quite quietly, and this zebra butterfly just came down and sat on my toe, and I just looked at Boris, who's looking at me, and we just met Caroline. It was just one of those moments. Yeah.
Yes, quite. It's hard to navigate that one, isn't it? Really dealing with those emotions. There's so much, isn't there, to feel about things.
Well, none of us know, do we? That's the thing. No matter how we want to believe in something, when somebody's gone, that you retained something else of them inside you, don't you? It's no longer physical that you can touch and communicate with in that way. It's something else. It's something. I mean, that one of the hardest things, I think, which I don't think we think about a lot, but when somebody dies, and all the memories they've got of you die with them, and that's quite a big thing. They know things about you and how you function and everything that other people don't. They've got their version of you, and that dies with them. And Caroline could be quite astute with me, and tell me what's what when needs to be. And when that goes, it's quite a big thing. And then vice versa, I know things about her and how she'd function.
Yes, God, it's hard, isn't it? It's especially so many decades and so much creativity between you. And back on the album, trying to lighten the mood, there's a couple of other tracks which were particularly stood out: Pilgrim and Age of Loneliness. Was there a little bit of I Need Contact as well? There's certain themes that sort of come out on the album.
Well, it is, so Pilgrim, I just get these thoughts sometimes, and you just follow the thought, and I've quite often thought, and I've probably seen it and witnessed it to a certain degree, but it's just a very simple little story about a couple who have a child who goes away to university or wherever, goes out into the wide world and learns things that they don't know, and they're waiting for that child to come back to tell them what the outside world's like, because they're no longer part of it, because they've, it's kind of outgrown them.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of that, because I've seen it with other people's kids and stuff, when that separation takes part and the parents are just kind of left there at home, and they're obviously still very well connected to their child, but then the child has gone out into the outside world, and when they come back, they're going to be bringing something back with them that the parents aren't exposed to, and I'm quite interested in that, because I notice it in myself. I notice it with Inky, not in a bad way, but I just see, right, she's out there now, and she'll come back and tell me things or phone me. We're in contact nearly every day, and she'll tell me stuff about the outside world. I think, God, I'll never experience that. It's not part of my world anymore.
No, just all those moments we had in the 80s, just hanging about and loitering around, and something might happen or not. But we don't gamble our time like that anymore, do we?
So that's that. Age of Loneliness is basically about extinction, about very in a nutshell. If a rhinoceros or something is the last one on the earth, does it know it's the last one, or does it carry on looking for a mate, or does it intrinsically understand that there won't be another one of its kind? And why has that happened? And in this particular instance, it's because of humans interference. So that's Age of Loneliness. And then it's about me going home to my rattling house and my rattling dog and my beautiful wife to get away from it all.
Yes, I remember that story, and they were trying to desperately find a way to create another, or at least not let it be the last one alive. Did that? That was about 5 or 10 years ago. Is that still? Are they still trying to help this?
They are trying to, because I think it was just a male left. I think, was it? Or, no, it was a female left, wasn't it? It was a female, and I think they were hoping that maybe they could use the sperm from another species, another type of rhino. But I think it's desperately sad. It's desperately sad that it's bad enough when it's an insect, obviously, but these sort of iconic animals, and in our lifetime, we're seeing the last ones of certain species. You can't quite believe it.
No, you think when they got down to the last 1,000, or at least the last 100, they thought, actually, we better just stop this. Not, Yes, it's a hard one to get your head around, really, isn't it? You're thinking, surely someone would have just put the brakes on it.
It's trying to get to grips with those sort of human activities that have caused all of this.
Yes.
And why? We've got all the information you could possibly have now for so many things not to happen with the internet, the information age, and yet it's not enough. It still can't stop us, which is very sad.
Yes.
Now, maybe that's how evolution's supposed to go. Maybe we don't. Maybe that's what it's like. We're just another organism that eventually will die out ourselves, Well,
I suppose it's like, that the universe, or this planet, has had all these amazing chapters, and we think this is an amazing one, but then there's probably been thousands of others. So,
and there'll be more.
There will be more. So, what will they find in the rocks? Who knows? I Need Contact. So how did this one develop?
Well, that one's another sort of sad, lonely thing. It's about, when somebody's, had a partner or something, and they've done everything together, and then one day you haven't got that person, and how it's more or less going to happen to most of us. If you've got loved ones, and there's every chance that one day it's going to be just you left, and then it's just that horrible existential thing of knowing that you are ultimately on your own.
Yes, this is that's tricky. I remember a friend whose wife died, and him going home from the hospital and seeing all these things she'd recorded on the box, and then her clothes and her exam certificates, and not knowing what you were supposed to do with this stuff,
Uh, I know, and unfortunately, as you get older, these things happen more and more because more people, that you've spent precious time with, they die. It's all inevitable. We know all that, but it's very difficult.
Yes, I know. It's a rock and a hard place. Do you want to be the first to go or the last? But if you're the last, you're going to have to deal with all these, moments.
Yeah, and like my brother lost his partner 20 years ago, and he hasn't been with anybody since, and he doesn't want to. He has no interest in. He never has had, but I know he's lonely. I know he's having to do all these things and fill up those spaces, on his own in that way. And I do think, life is about sharing, and there's nothing better than being able to share experiences with someone else.
Yes, it is lonely. Crikey. And then on your opening track, I used to be Lou Reed. Where did this one come from?
They've all got some genesis. Well, that one, basically, my older brother, I love Lou Reed anyway, so I'm a big fan of Lou Reed. But my brother always used to assume different personalities when growing up. In fact, really right up until the end. He could never just be himself. And I remember him as a kid, he'd sort of have his collar turned up and chewing a match. And I'd be thinking, oh, I know what he's doing. He's in his Lou Reed phase. He thinks he's Lou Reed. We'd be down the beach and we'd have just listened to Transformer or something, or Sally Can't Dance. And so it's kind of like about that in his mind. At those moments, he would feel he was that person. So he'd act like it.
Yes.
He really would. So talking to other people, he'd sort of be acting like it. And I think, okay. So that's kind of where that song came from. Originally, I started to write a short story about being dead and being in the other place, wherever that is, and talking to people there. They were just milling around, and Lou Reed actually coming up to me and saying, I used to be Lou Reed, and sort of looking, thinking, God, I can't believe Lou Reed saying that to me. At least Walk on the Wild Side, do you remember that? Just thinking that happens.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I remember recently, I think Laurie Anderson's been in Manchester, and I was thinking it must be very strange, like you were saying, that she's got no one. Well, she might do, but yeah, I mean, she doesn't have Lou there anymore to just chat about this and that and swap stories.
They had quite a thing going on, really, didn't they? Two great creative artists, that really complemented each other in a way, with great histories. It must have been quite something to lose him.
Yeah, but they probably squabbled about sort of domestic things in the kitchen and putting things back properly, which would have been great to have known, wouldn't it?
But that's what you do, isn't it? That's the thing. These two great minds, and but yeah, they probably, who's taking the dogs out for a walk, and I did it yesterday, and and then also
moaning about using the last bit of toilet paper, and you think, oh yeah, I could imagine Lou being terrible for replacing the toilet roll.
Yeah, but also the thing I think about is, Laurie Anderson thinking about his past, because he was quite a shit. I think,
yes.
Because obviously he got better as such, but he could be quite an unpleasant person apparently. So she'd know all about that because it's well documented, and she probably met him back in the day when he was like that anyway.
It's weird, isn't it, really? Yes. So look, with the album, it's come out now, hasn't it? This has definitely happened. And then what's your next kind of process? You're not playing any live dates, are you?
But I'm hoping to get a band together. I mean, in Italy, they think they've got some dates for me, sort of being sorted out for the summer. And I've got two people I can use there, plus Boris. I'm looking for one other. But I want to do some gigs here, but it's finding musicians. I particularly want some youngish musicians, just because I want a youngish energy to this. I don't really, I just want it to be something that feels very fresh and alive. So I'm trying to find people. It's not easy, But yeah, so playing live is definitely the next thing, really. That's what I'm trying to concentrate on.
Yes.
I'm still writing as well, so I'm trying to write as if there will be another album or tracks that I play live.
That's amazing. That is really good news.
Rolo from the Wooden Tops is just remixing a couple of tracks as well, which is great. So I've heard one of them, which is sounding really good. So that's been a nice thing that's come out of it as well.
Good old Rolo.
Yeah, well, I honestly can't remember if I actually met him, but we had the same manager and we were on Rough Trade at the same time. So it's probably my memory, but it was nice because he contacted me and said he'd really like to do a couple of remixes. So that's been nice.
God, well, hopefully you'll be at is it Cafe Otto at least once?
Well, I'm hoping that we do get some gigs together. I'm hoping we will.
Yes.
It's money. The same as everything in this day and age. Everything's complicated again. People used to be able to do things for free, for little, knowing that they'll get something a bit later on. But it's not really like that now. It's changed a lot.
It is tricky, actually. And so is it available on streaming services? Are you doing physical product as well?
Yeah, it should have all come out at the same time, and I've just had a discussion about it today, actually. So it was all supposed to come out together. Then it was going to be 2 weeks late, and then I spoke to Max last night. He said, they want to put it out now in February, the physical, the vinyl, and the CDs. So it's coming out. We've actually got a sort of Zoom chat tomorrow night because I've got a guy doing my PR in New Zealand, and UTM, who's a really good sort of musical service, and he's been putting together a sort of campaign, and now we've got to put that to bed for the moment and start again ready for February. So it's like another release already.
Yes.
But it's doing all right. It's not doing too bad. It's been picked up, on Spotify and things. It's kind of doing all right. It's just really hard to get magazines or radio play here. It's just impossible. There's nobody working on it to do it. And yeah, it's just different times. It's just so different from doing music before. The whole social media thing I find very difficult, to sit there, putting another picture up and another clip and another of that, and trying to sell yourself every day.
It's tricky. It's an odd world, isn't it?
Strange. Honestly, but it works. It actually works. It might be slow, but you suddenly say, another 10 followers today. Oh, another, it's just very odd. It's very strange.
Well, what I'll do, and when I put this up, I'll send you a link, and you can always hopefully use it on any of your social media platform sites, and I'll put it on my Facebook page as well, and hopefully people will go, oh, right, this is amazing.
There's a record collector piece coming out, by the way, as well, that you might be interested in. It's the January issue, but it's out this month, which is a Shelleyan Orphan feature.
Oh my God, this is brilliant. Who wrote it?
Paul Lester.
Lester, God, he's a big fan, isn't he? Oh, well, that's great, because I have to confess, I got something called Readly, where you can sort of access magazines. And I mean, I used to be a bit addicted to magazines once, and it costs so much money, doesn't it? But now you can just vaguely subscribe to it's a bit like Spotify, but for magazines. So I'll have a look at that. That'll be amazing. And if you were to play live, would you do any, past, material from your, early years?
I just, oh my God, I honestly don't know, because of Caroline. We did it. I did a gig in Italy when we first went recording, because Max basically made us do it, and we kept saying, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. And he basically said, there'll just be a handful of people. It's for Alberto's birthday. And it wasn't. It was in this sort of church venue, and it was full. And Annie Barbazza, who's a fantastic Italian singer, who actually sings on the album, she did a set before our set, and she did Anatomy of Love, and it absolutely cracked me up. I didn't know she was going to do it, and it was actually quite upsetting. It was a lovely rendition, but it's just very weird, very, very weird.
Yes.
Maybe I'm over that sort of thing now. I don't know, but I do find it quite... There's a program at the moment, you probably got to go in a sec, but there's a program what's it called? It's on iPlayer. I can't remember what it's called, but somebody texted me the other day and said, Caroline's on it doing Late Night in the background in one of the scenes. And I'm kind of glad I wasn't watching that and get caught out by it.
Oh, God. So that's on iPlayer?
Yeah, it's called Time something. Or, I can't remember. It's one word. But yeah, anyway, so that would have shocked me a bit, I think.
Yeah. Well, gosh. Well, it's only understandable, though. I mean, it's never easy, is it?
Well, it's because we're not big and famous, so you hear the stuff everywhere. So if you do hear it, it's kind of like, it sort of pulls you up a bit.
Yeah. Well, also, I guess it's, you're a previous chapter in your life when you were in a very different place and a different physical state, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's weird when I look back and you think, oh, that was my 20s, oh, that's what I was doing in my 30s. And obviously you can recognise yourself, but at the same time, you're quite a different scene, isn't it?
But it's extraordinary because recently it's happened a couple of times, but recently I met somebody that I haven't seen for 42 years. So he knew me when I was talking about trying to get into music and when I just met Caroline. And I mean, we haven't even had any contact in that time. So it really is just like this thing. We met up recently and he was telling me what I was like back then, and it's just extraordinary because he knows I've got into music and he knows the things I've done in a way, but he doesn't know me, the person doing those things. So he just remembers me from that period of about 3-4 years when we all used to hang out. And it's extraordinary, the things he was telling me that I used to talk about. And, you think, was I really thinking of talking about that? Quite interesting sort of things about life after death and stuff. But he said, no, you always talk about reincarnation and da-da-da. And I think, oh my God, what sort of kid was I?
Yes, God. You didn't go down orgone energy by any chance?
No, what's that?
Oh, it was one thing that Wilhelm Reich got into something called orgone energy.
They all later.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was just I remember, all those the world of ley lines and various other earth energies. And, it seemed to all come together, didn't it? I just wondered if you were already in that world.
I am interested in those things. And I don't push them away as if to say, oh, that's rubbish. It's just how they've been sort of jumped on and used for so many different ways of being, if you like. I've done the dowsing thing with rods and it works. It's, it does actually work.
Yes.
Tried it and I'd rather just go, yeah, it works, and just leave it at that. I don't have to go into some new age speak about it. It's just, and it is something that the ancient people seem to know about finding water. So it was a tool almost, and I'm sure there's lots of other things like that maybe we've forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we are coming to the winter solstice, it will be quite a nice feeling of coming through the longest night, shortest day, and feeling awakened again.
We need.
I sound quite hippy-trippy there, don't I?
Sorry. No. Wet lodge on the solstices and things, and I have to say they were really good.
And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. A massive thanks to Jem for giving me the time for that, talking about his life in Vamberator, well, the early years now, and also times with Shelleyan Orphan. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, oh gosh, all those social media platform sites. Just do C86 show. And yes, David Eastaugh, it should get to me. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe.